The Case of Gretchen Harrington, Justice Delayed or Denied. True crime cases often challenge our sense of justice, but few are as haunting and complex as the decades-long investigation into the tragic death of 8-year-old Gretchen Harrington. This case brings us face to face with the fragility of memory, the limitations of evidence after decades, and the weight of a not guilty verdict that leaves questions unanswered. Today, we untangle the story of Gretchen's disappearance, the charges brought against a retired minister, and the trial that concluded with an explosive verdict just this past year. Can justice truly be served half a century later? Let's investigate. In August 1975, Gretchen Harrington, a sweet and spirited 8-year-old girl, left her home for Bible camp in Pennsylvania. She walked this familiar route before, her mornings spent in the safety of her father's church and afternoons at another local church. But on this fateful day, Gretchen never reached her destination. Her absence was quickly noticed, sparking panic, heartache, and a frantic search that involved police and her tight-knit community. Days turned into weeks with no sign of Gretchen. Then, in a grim discovery, her remains were found in a Delaware County park. The realization of foul play devastated her family and sent shockwaves through the local area. Yet, despite their grief, the police investigation faltered. Leads dried up, suspects were questioned but released, and after years of dead ends, the case turned cold, leaving the Harrington family in limbo and a killer seemingly beyond justice. For nearly 50 years, Gretchen's case lingered in the shadows, unresolved. But in the summer of 2023, a breakthrough brought the story back to light. David Zanstra, an 84-year-old retired minister living in Marietta, Georgia, was charged with Gretchen's abduction and murder. The allegations against Zanstra, a man known for his faith and work as a minister, were nothing short of shocking. Was it possible that this man, who had long represented comfort and morality to his community, could be responsible for such a heinous crime? The case against Zanstra emerged from a combination of dogged re-examinations of evidence and advancing forensic science. While details of the investigation's breakthrough remain partially shrouded in mystery, authorities hinted at new testimonies and potential connections made through modern technology. From there, the pieces seemed to fall into place, leading to Zanstra's arrest and subsequent trial. For Gretchen's family, the development seemed to offer long-awaited hope for justice. But for others who knew Zanstra personally, it raised disbelief and fierce questions. David Zanstra was not just a retired minister. To his congregation in Georgia, and many in Pennsylvania, he was seen as a moral compass, a man of faith and family. The idea that he could be tied to an unsolved murder shook those who trusted him to their core. Yet, the accusations sparked a reinterpretation of his past and raised questions about his character. The prosecution painted Zanstra as a man capable of hiding a terrible crime in plain sight. They relied on glimpses of evidence, though aged, suggesting his involvement in Gretchen's disappearance and ultimate death. But the defense argued otherwise. The years had eroded memories, records, and the reliability of hearsay. Could a case built on one side's narrative and fragments of evidence stand up in court nearly 5 decades later? In October 2023, Zanstra faced his fate in court. The trial spanned 4 days, peeling back layers of this deeply unsettling case. Witnesses took the stand, evidence was presented, and arguments highlighted both the weight of loss and the limitations of time. For the prosecution, the goal was clear: prove that Zanstra had taken Gretchen's life and ended nearly half a century of questions. For the defense, the aim was to stress how circumstantial and unreliable the evidence was after so many years. Then came the moment everyone had waited for. After less than an hour of jury deliberation, the verdict was reached: not guilty. Gasps filled the courtroom. Some cried tears of relief for Zanstra, while others shook uncontrollably with the anguish of justice denied. The rapidity of the jury's decision only deepened the controversy. For Zanstra's advocates, the verdict vindicated a man they believed was falsely accused. For Gretchen's family and supporters, it was another blow in their long search for answers. And for the rest of us, the case raises deeper questions about justice, especially in the murky waters of cold cases. This case underscores the difficulties in prosecuting a crime that occurred nearly 50 years ago. Time erodes memories and weakens evidence. Witnesses grow old, move away, or pass on. Surveillance systems and investigative techniques from the 1970s were nowhere near as advanced as they are now. So, how does the justice system confront these hurdles? One of the glaring issues in such cases is the reliability of testimony. Memories fade over time, leaving gaps that can undermine even the most compelling stories. Evidence, too, whether physical or circumstantial, deteriorates. DNA samples that might have once been critical can become degraded, and if there is no physical evidence, prosecutors are left leaning heavily on witnesses who may be less than reliable after decades. In Zanstra's case, it seems the jury was unconvinced by the prosecution's claims, due in part to these limitations. The not guilty verdict doesn't affirm his innocence so much as it reflects the reasonable doubt inherent to the prosecution's evidence. While the legal system emphasizes innocent until proven guilty, cases like this draw out the tension between rigorous legal standards and the emotional weight of victims' families who demand justice. For Gretchen's family, her death has been an enduring wound. The 2023 developments revived the pain of her loss, but offered the faint hope that justice might finally be served. Zanstra's acquittal shattered that hope, leaving them to grapple with the reality that her killer might never face accountability. For the Harringtons, as for so many families like them, the case highlights the unbearable endurance of grief without closure. The wider community was equally rocked by the case. In Delaware County, Pennsylvania, where Gretchen lived, and in Marietta, Georgia, where Zanstra lived out his retirement, people were forced to confront difficult truths about justice, guilt, and the limitations of our legal system. Some questioned whether justice could ever prevail in cases where so much evidence had been lost to time. Others reevaluated their trust in figures of authority, faith, and community. The case shrouded both towns in doubt, where faith in institutions, and even each other, was tested. The case of Gretchen Harrington forces us to reflect on a complicated question. Can justice ever truly be achieved in circumstances like these? Cold case prosecutions offer hope to victims' families that no crime will remain forgotten, but they also confront the harsh reality that time corrodes truth. The not guilty verdict doesn't mean the crime didn't happen. It only means that the legal system was unable to prove beyond reasonable doubt that Zanstra was responsible. This case reminds us how critical advancements in forensic science and the dedication of investigators are in solving decades-old crimes. New technologies such as DNA sequencing and data analysis have cracked cases thought lost to history. But Gretchen's case shows that even when a breakthrough sets wheels in motion, trials must contend with the immense burden of time's passing. The haunting reality of this case lies not just in its tragedy, but in its ambiguity. An 8-year-old girl was abducted and murdered, a trusted figure was accused, and today, nearly 50 years later, no definitive answers remain. For Gretchen's loved ones, her story isn't over. The quest for clarity, accountability, and some semblance of peace continues to this day. As investigators and families push for closure in cold cases, this story begs larger questions for us all. What does justice look like in cases long forgotten? How do we balance the weight of loss against the limitations of the law? And how do we, as a society, ensure that victims like Gretchen are never truly forgotten? To all the true crime enthusiasts watching today, remember this case and this family. Gretchen Harrington's story is more than a mystery. It's a reminder of the fragile nature of justice and the resilience of those who refuse to give up on the truth. While the world has moved on from that August day in 1975, the Harrington family hasn't, and neither should we.